I'm Leah Danielson,
I'm David Evian.
I'm Matt Callahan.
and we watch Channel 5 Eyewitness News at 10 o'clock at night, and this is our analysis of it. So the talent on the news, the two main anchors were Leah McLean and Bill Lunn, and then for sports was Chris Long, and the weatherman for 5 News at 10 o'clock at night was Dave Dahl. And so the story selection that we saw was they focus a lot on local news, and I emailed the senior executive producer Katie Hamner, and she told us that that's what the focus was. So we thought that their philosophy really matched what they were showing as far as news stories. And the top three stories that they showed really focused on impact as well. The first one was rising property taxes in the counties around the metro area, so that affected a lot of the viewing area of KSTP. Also, the second main story was the school board vote, and that also affects a lot of the parents who watch the news and a lot of people in the community. And then their third top story was the chokehold in New York that the officer had on a citizen who died, and that's just a big story throughout the whole country. And they were able to kind of localize the story and show how officers in Minneapolis deal with this sort of thing too. So from chapter 2, what we thought that they focused on was proximity, impact, and conflict for these top stories. And then the intended audience too, I asked in the email, and what she told me is Minnesota, the metro area, is their main focus, and also part of Wisconsin. But then they also try to focus on Minnesota as a state in the whole, and they try to connect all of their stories to their viewing area. And that's kind of a map of their viewing area too. And then the demographics, what they said was the age 25 to 50 range, because that's what a lot of their commercials kind of aim for, people in that age. And they also, we think that they tend to have a lot of their stories that impact families, such as the school board vote story. And then they also talked about a restaurant in the metro area, so I think they do have a lot of stories too that deal with the Minneapolis and St. Paul downtown area.
And then for their organization, how they organize their stories and how they're on the air. First, they really focus on impact, with the amount of impact. So the story with the highest amount of impact for their viewing audience, but obviously be at the top or the beginning of their newscast. And then as the stories go down, probably less people are going to be impacted by this story, but yet there's going to always be some kind of impact to their viewing audience in some way or form. And then both anchors actually read the top stories, and then they're thrown to reporters, because you want more coverage of those top stories, because they're the top ones, they're more important. So people are going to want more information when it comes to those. And then also the anchors take turns in reading blocks. So first you'll see one anchor talk about or read probably 4 or 5 stories, and then the next block of the 4 or 5 stories, it'll be a different anchor, just to give you some different personnel and a different delivery for all the news stories of the newscast. And then the weather is near the end of the first and the second half hour, because, well, weather changes in Minnesota, but also because people are always talking about the weather. That's always a big topic in Minnesota. So with the news, you always want to be up to date with the weather. And if you missed the first, near the end of the first news weathercast, then you can always check and come in on the second news weathercast. And then for all the sports fans, well, I don't know if they watch the whole newscast until the last 5 minutes, but they definitely tune in the last 5 minutes to really get their inside scoop on all the latest sporting events and news and sports. So that's kind of how KSTP organizes their newscast.
And now we want to show you how they open and close with this video.
An unarmed man dies at the hand of a New York City police officer. The development sparking outrage in that city tonight.
Property taxes are on the rise, and so are tempers here in Isanti County. Coming up, we'll tell you by how much and what, if anything, can be done.
And it's decision day after neighborhood concerns put a restaurant opening on hold.
We're hoping today will be the final day that we'll be able to get the outcome that we've been looking for.
But we begin tonight with rising property taxes.
Property taxes are going up for nearly every Minnesotan. Budget proposals show increases in every.
Okay, so that's kind of how their opening goes. They normally preview about 3 stories, and then they throw it to the anchors, who then start reporting on it, and then they send it to the reporters. And now I'll show you how they normally close.
Counties surrounding the Twin Cities metro area.
A company in Northern California has come up with this thing. It's half go-kart, half big wheel. It is, simply put, freaking awesome. This sucker markets for $2,000. That comes with a 6.5 horsepower engine, but they'll make you a souped-up model for $3,000 that will really be the envy of kids and grown-ups all over your neighborhood. My neighbor showed me this video, and hopefully he and I
Kid
can.
action. That's pretty good, yeah. Kind of like your
Very
shopper, Dave. Yeah, really big boy toy.
Good night, folks.
So as you can see, the way they close off their video is with a little, kind of a tease.
Yeah, they call it the nightcap, and I was a little thrown off because after sports, he said, "We'll be right back with your nightcap," and I'm like, "What is that?" But then I guess if you watch it every day, you'll kind of understand that's their kind of tease.
And also, who did the tease was Chris Long, the sports anchor. So it was a little different, but he did really well in the tease. Though.
Yeah. Okay, so we also want to show you another video. We watched the news again the next day on Thursday night. The first night we watched was Wednesday. So we want to show you how they opened the news on that day because it was a little bit different.
We're working with the Snow computer, by the way.
Can you name the world's most beautiful diamond?
This is just a commercial before it'll play.
Lazar, the world's most beautiful diamond?
She knows, now you do too. Waiting for her at RF Moeller Jewelry.
From City Hall to 4 lanes of freeway, protesters snarl afternoon traffic. Why law enforcement let it happen.
A controversial decision after a heated debate inside a packed room.
If I come out, am I still going to be able to do what I love to do?
In the rush to create new rights for transgenders, you are failing to protect the rights of biological girls.
How the vote is creating change in Minnesota high school sports.
And the Battle of the Stadiums. 2 competing efforts to bring Major League Soccer to Minneapolis as one of the plans gains a powerful new supporter.
But first tonight, traffic is back to normal on 35W. Earlier today,
Okay, so this, on Thursday it was a little different because there were those big protests in town. So they spent about 3 minutes reporting on this when they first opened. And as you saw, the 2 anchors were standing up in the beginning on Thursday's newscast instead of sitting in their anchor chairs like they normally do. So that was a difference, how they can vary, depending on how big the story is, they vary the delivery to kind of match it. And then we kind of saw that the format was a little different too. The first, on Wednesday, they would alternate, like kind of read an even number of stories between the 2 anchors, Bill and Leah. But then this newscast, it seemed like Bill would read longer blocks of stories, and then Leah would report on more ones where she'd have to throw it to reporters or talk to other people. So that was kind of a difference too. And this one, Dave Dahl was in the beginning a little later, and he is the weatherman. So I thought that was interesting too because he reported on this Christmas tree story that they were selling Christmas trees to support veterans. So that was kind of unusual that they had the weatherman report on a story. And then, like I said, Bill kind of read more stories than Leah did on that day.
And then the variety and pace, like as you can see, the packages are like spaced out really well for variety, because in a newscast, as we've learned in this class, any type of newscast, you want to have a different kind of variety to kind of branch and hit different parts of your audience that you're trying to shoot for when you're giving out your newscast. And then variety of the second show is a little bit better, probably just because they have a little more time to look through all their different stories and see how they really wanted to put them in order and see what kind of variety they had in the story, so they could prioritize that throughout the newscast.
And I think additionally on the second day when we watched it, that there was more news to report on, because they had all those demonstrations in town and there were bigger stories to talk about. So that kind of maybe is a factor that comes into play.
There's always like a slow news day as well. I mean, you can't get all the stories all the time, but I mean, you gotta make do with what you have to.
So now we'll explain what we liked and didn't like. We liked the variety because we were talked about earlier how that's important to keep the viewer's attention. Also their story selection too. We liked how they had the most impactful ones first, because a lot of people will just watch it at the beginning to see what the headlines are. And they really keep your attention, so you watch the entire newscast rather than just tuning in for the headlines. And then they had these exclusives too. For some of the stories, they would say, and you'll only see this on 5. So they say that just so their viewers feel like special, like because they're watching Channel 5, that they're going to be having a better experience than if they watched a different station. And then they recover well from their mistakes, because on the first newscast, one of the teleprompters went out for Bill Lunn, and it looked like he was trying to read off of Leah's teleprompter, like looking across, and it looked kind of awkward. But we think that they recovered pretty well for it, and they never apologized or anything. So I don't know if that's normally typical for them not to apologize and just keep going, but we think that they kind of recovered okay. And then we didn't really like that wrap up when they had I forget what was it called? So you don't even remember what it's
Yeah,
called.
I don't
When they had
remember
this-
either.
Yeah, there you
the
go.
sports guy Chris Long, and when he would read the kicker at the end of the newscast, we thought that there would probably be a better way to do it. Maybe have all the anchors tease it or something. It was called the nightcap, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a cute idea, like a nightcap, like
Right.
going off of that sort of thing.
And at the end, like you did see some of all the anchors came back into a wide shot, and they were kind of talking about it, but they only had about 4 seconds, and then the newscast was fading out, and then it was over. So you didn't really get to hear that much dialogue about the nightcap between all the anchors. So then it's kind of like, oh, what did I just see? It didn't really stick in the audience's head at the end of the newscast like he was trying to.
And Matt will talk about sports, because he's a sports guy.
So yeah, looking at some of the sports, what I saw with the sports as well is that Chris Long has got this kind of raspy kind of voice when he talks, and it's kind of it's got a nice feel to him. And he had his own desk, by the way, when he was doing the sports cast, and he really showed confidence in what he was doing. He knew what he needed to report, what stuff he wanted to know with the news. So he kind of talked about the Wild, Twins, and Vikings. It's centered around Minnesota, obviously, since it's a Minnesota station. So they made sure that, it was more Minnesota-based, the big stories for the Vikings. They're taking on, last week they were about to take on the Jets, how they're preparing for this week. Doing a couple interviews, and then talking about the Wild, especially Ryan Suter, who has the mumps right now, that people, the top defenseman for the Minnesota Wild, looking at him. People want to keep up to date with that stuff as well. And then looking at the Twins as well, the Twins, big sign with Torrey Hunter coming back to the Minnesota Twins. He did his own interview with him, which is nice, because, not many people have that kind of thing with sports. I mean, having one-on-one interview when they, finally come to Minnesota when they signed that 1-year deal. And, $10 million for Torrey Hunter. So he had it wasn't like huge stories, but Torrey Hunter coming back to the Twins was a big story for them. And then you kind of see him stand in front